Are any of you as excited about living in today's day? I mean, yeah, you've got it going. Can you feel it in your bones? There's been like this amazing excitement I know I've had in just the last few weeks that has been like, I have to go, breathe, calm down. Because I mean, literally, I'm like, so excited. And I'm not one to be a cheerleader by any means. But are you excited about this week's portion? Okay, I don't like to get everyone excited and get everyone going and get your juices flowing. I just like to teach. But this portion, I have a great honor in bringing forth to you. So it's called Bo, and it means come in English. So let's get into this. I wanted to let everyone know my name is Sandra Stapleton. I'm an associate pastor here at Oasis. My husband Lance and I have been a pastor here for a long time. And I just wanted to introduce myself for live stream and to all of our visitors today. I see that we have a few visitors, so we want to say hello to you and welcome you today too. Okay, so before we get into the portion, Father, again, we just want to come before you, and we want to enter into this time where we ask you to open our minds, our hearts, our eyes, and our ears. We thank you, Father, that you teach us everything that we need to know, and we just ask that through your Spirit, that you teach us exactly what we need to know today. In Yeshua's name, we commit this time to you. Amen. Okay. I didn't get a clicker. Am I supposed to do that? Okay. So, next. Okay, so we've got a few topics that we're going to cover today, but it's not going to be that we're going to get to everything just during this time. We're going to also midrash a good portion of this. So hit it one more time, Lucas. We're going to go over the last 3 plagues of Egypt. Lucas, hit it again. About 3 more times. We're going to go over the plagues, and we're going to go over some of the new moon items, Rosh Chodesh. Also in this portion is the Passover instruction and sanctification of the firstborn. Now, as far as the last 3 plagues of Egypt, there's not really a time, because I wanted to research, there's not really a time like the plague started on this day and it ended on this day. But I wanted to find out what is the common thought about how long of a duration it went from when Moses and Aaron first went to Pharaoh as to kind of when the last one, because we know when the last one was. And so based on the things mentioned in the scriptures, you can kind of tell that it was anywhere from a few months to a year of a duration. In the Mishnah, it talks about this time frame being approximately 1 year from number 1 through number 10. But the Bible says, because we've got some hints, it says, Moses was 80 years old when the 10 plagues started after he spoke to Pharaoh. After the plagues were done and Pharaoh finally let the Israelites go, they wandered in the desert for 40 years. Moses died at the end of the 40 years at the age of 120 years old. Therefore, if Moses was 80 at the start, he wandered for 40 years, and he died at 120, the plagues were about to have endured around 1 year. So, we'll see. The part where in this portion, I'm just going to kind of do a quick summary about Rosh Chodesh, the new moon. I don't know about you, but when I grew up learning, I never really studied anything about Rosh Chodesh, about the new moon, observing the new moon. And so the reason why this is such an important command and an instruction in this portion is because by it, that's how you set the Moedim. That's how you set God's holy appointed times, because he says, on this day, during this week, at this time, this is when my Passover is. This is when this is. I mean, all of the festivals have an appointed time. And so by the new moon, that is set. And it has to be on target so that they could be observed. Go ahead to the next slide. Okay, so this is a slide of all of the plagues of Egypt, and I wanted to show you what this information was, not to teach you about false gods, but to show you that specifically the Father in these 10 plagues targeted the false gods of Egypt. Okay, so we have the water turning into blood. That was against the false god Hapi or Osiris. Now, the Nile was the lifeblood of Egypt at the time. Okay, so the Nile provided business, it provided commerce. What would you say might be an equivalent to that lifeblood today? It's like our business, our lifeblood, our careers, our jobs, our income, groceries. It's everything that we do in order to make it, to live, to have a living. A frog infestation was the second plague. That was targeted against the false deity of Heket, who was believed to have assisted with childbirth and had a face of a frog. So that's why there was an infestation of frogs. With the third one, lice, gnats, or a flea infestation, was targeted at the god of Geb, who represented the earth, and was believed to be raised by Isis, who presided over death and funerals. Do we ever hear about Isis today? Do we hear kind of a similarity? You know, Isis is associated with death and funerals as well. The fourth plague, wild animals, flies, and swarms, was targeted against Ma'at. It was a representation of moral and physical law and believed to judge the dead. The fifth plague, livestock. The sixth one, boils. The seventh one, hail and fire. You know, in Egypt, there were over 2,000 false Egyptian goddesses and gods. I don't know how they could have kept up with everything. So Adonai specifically targeted these gods, and what might you think might be some false gods that exist in our country today? What might be some false gods? Self is a definitely, that's one. Celebrities type of, idol worship. Anything that we put, what's that? Science, yes. You mentioned that, Don. I was actually watching a video the other day about the top particle scientists in the field who are working over with the Hadron Collider in Geneva, Switzerland. Their big question is this: why is there something instead of nothing? They have spent bazillions of dollars to answer and search for the answer to this question. Why is there something instead of nothing? Well, I can save them a whole lot of money because I can tell you that it's because God said. So, yes, we can answer that question for them. But there's a lot of false gods that are in our world today, in our economy, and in everything. But let's go ahead and dive into the portion. I'm going to read Exodus, next slide, Hit it again? Okay. Chapter 10, verses 1 through 6. Adonai said to Moshe, "Go to Pharaoh, for I have made him and his servants hard-hearted, so that I can demonstrate these signs of mine among them, so that you can tell your son and grandson about what I did to Egypt, and about my signs that I demonstrated among them, and so that you will know that I am Adonai." Moshe and Aaron went into Pharaoh and said to him, "Here is what Adonai, God of the Hebrews, says. How much longer will you refuse to submit to me? Let my people go so that they can worship me. Otherwise, if you refuse to let my people go, tomorrow I will bring locusts into your territory. One won't be able to see the ground, so completely will the locusts cover it. They will eat everything you have still that escaped the hail, including every tree you have growing in the field. They will fill your houses and those of your servants and of all the Egyptians. It will be like nothing your fathers or their fathers have ever seen since the day they were born until today." Then he turned his back and left. So why would God the Father, why would Adonai bring in all of these plagues to the people? He wanted to prove to not just the Egyptians, but also to Israel, who is the real God here. This is why the false gods were targeted. It was a standoff. And there was no challenge. There was nothing to show at all from the false god side. I underlined, can we go back? I underlined, so that I can demonstrate these signs of mine among them, so that you can tell your son and grandson about what I did to Egypt. So we have a responsibility to teach. We have a responsibility to share with our children, with our grandchildren, with our great-grandchildren. Some of you have great-grandchildren in here. To tell them exactly your story, what you've seen, what you've experienced, and to teach them the scriptures. We have that as a responsibility. That you all will know that I am Adonai. Okay, next slide. Exodus 10, verses 7 through 11. Pharaoh's servants said to him, "How much longer must this fellow be a snare for us? Let the people go and worship Adonai their God. Don't you understand yet that Egypt is being destroyed?" So Moshe and Aaron were brought to Pharaoh again, and he said to them, "Go, worship Adonai, your God. But who exactly is going?" Moshe answered, "We will go with our young and our old, our sons and our daughters, and we will go with our flocks and herds, for we must celebrate a feast to Adonai." Pharaoh said to them, "Adonai certainly will be with you if I ever let you go with your children. It's clear that you are up to no good, nothing doing. Just the men among you may go and worship Adonai. That's what you want, isn't it?" And they were driven out of Pharaoh's presence. You know, those that were Pharaoh's advisors, they started to look at him this is plague number 8. They started to look at him at this point and start to get bolder. And they were saying, "Are you crazy? These people need to go. These people need to get out of here because this is just getting too much." And so they started to advise Pharaoh and tell him in a not so politically correct way anymore. But again, Pharaoh's heart was hardened. So the part that I underlined, don't you understand yet that Egypt is being destroyed? You know, we have advisors to our leadership, our political leadership, that are advising this way and do this and do that. And is it improving the situation? It's not really improving the situation because basically, and bottom line is because Adonai has been taken out of the picture. Adonai is no longer welcome. And is our Egypt being destroyed? And so Pharaoh starts to ask Moshe and Aaron, who exactly is going now? You know, I kind of haven't really even been paying attention to you when you've asked me the last several times, but who are you planning to take to go to this feast out in the desert for 3 days? Now, that's what he asked for. He asked to go out to celebrate a feast unto Adonai for 3 days travel into the wilderness. He didn't ask, I'm going to take all the people and we're never coming back. He asked to go out with all of the Hebrews for 3 days to worship a feast to Adonai. And so he started to say everyone, you know, they're going to take the women, the children, the flocks, all their stuff also, and all the men, and we're going. And he's basically saying, you're up to no good. He was starting to get really suspicious about his plan, about Moshe's plan. Why would he get suspicious? Because the guy's getting scared. He's getting fearful. Pharaoh is starting to shake in his boots, rightly so. You know, whenever Israel today has something to present or a festival to celebrate or a plan to take out, is there any suspicion that accompanies what they're doing? Likely. And then they were driven out of Pharaoh's presence. I underline that here. So do you think a couple of ushers came and escorted them out of the building? I don't think so. I think that they were thrown out. And it wasn't nice. You know, they being the enemy, will try to bully you, Israel. And it may not be in a nice way. It may not be in a politically correct way. The enemy wants to use intimidation and fear, and that's exactly what force wanted to take out Moshe and Aaron from Pharaoh's presence, is these guys probably grabbed them and threw them out violently. That's an opinion that I have, because it says that they were driven out of Pharaoh's presence. You know, in Revelation 9:3, it says, "Then out of the smoke unto the earth came locusts, and they were given power like the power scorpions have on earth." Okay, so in Revelation, everyone's well aware that is a prophetic book amongst basically every book in the scriptures. But in Revelation, we have the understanding that these things have not yet occurred. So 9:3, that verse, is talking about a future event. And so in the future, we are going to see that there's smoke onto the earth, which are in the form of locusts, and they were given power like the power of scorpions have on earth. Okay, now, Revelation is largely written in a type and shadow type of format, where things represent things, or John here is describing things that he's never seen before. So we don't exactly know if it's exactly locusts or exactly something else. It could be that it could be a swarm of some sort. And equating that in today's likelihood or today's day, the locust could be a swarm of something coming in that they've got some powerful things to sting with. You know, having been in the military, one of the squadrons that I used to work in was munitions maintenance squadron. And our business was to make bombs and missiles. And one of those is called a stinger. So I see a lot of possibilities here. And I also listened to a really cool video that you guys can catch on Bill Cloud's page as a Torah tidbit. It's called "The Locusts Are Coming." So when you get a moment, you definitely want to jot that down and watch that when you can. Okay, next slide. So the locust infestation. Okay, number 8 on our slide. This false deity had the head of a ram. There's a picture of it on the screen. And this particular figure, this statue that's evidence today, it's protecting Pharaoh. And Pharaoh he believed that this false god was a patron of his, a father figure of his. And this false deity named Amun was believed to be a god of creation. And so there is no other god than Yahweh, than Adonai. And he came to demonstrate that this God had no power at all with the people any longer. Being the 8th plague, this plague did not impact or affect the people of Israel in any way, shape, or form. In everyone's houses of those who were not Israel were swarms and infested with locusts. But all the people who were his had nothing, no locusts. And you know, this plague was brought on by Adonai and everyone knew it. And the magicians were called in and they could only make the problem worse. They couldn't improve it. They couldn't make the locusts go away. All they could do was make the problem even worse. Let's go to the next one. I'm going to read Exodus chapter 10, verse 21 through 29. It says, Adonai said to Moshe, "Reach out your hand toward the sky, and there will be darkness over the land of Egypt, darkness so thick it can be felt." Moshe reached out his hand toward the sky, and there was a thick darkness in the entire land of Egypt for 3 days. People couldn't see each other, and no one went anywhere for 3 days. But all the people of Israel had light in their homes. Pharaoh summoned Moshe and said, "Go, worship Adonai. Only leave your flocks and herds behind. Your children may go with you." Moshe answered, "You must also see to it that we have sacrifices and burnt offerings so that we can sacrifice to Adonai our God. Our livestock will also go with us. Not a hoof will be left behind, because we must choose some of them to worship Adonai our God, and we don't know which ones we will need to worship Adonai until we get there." But Adonai made Pharaoh hard-hearted, and he would not let them go. Pharaoh said to them, "Get away from me, and you had better not see my face again, because the day you see my face, you will die." And Moshe answered, "Well spoken. I will see your face no more." Okay, so Adonai says to Moshe, "Reach out your hand toward the sky, and then darkness will come out." Okay, could Adonai have done that without Moshe? Because God can do everything, right? Why does he partner with his people and ask something of us? Something of a human being who is a humble nothing. He uses us as his hands and feet. He uses us as his representatives, as our voice, as his voice here on earth. He's empowered all of us to be his ambassador, his representative. And if he asks us to do something as silly or insignificant as it may seem, he asked Moshe to reach his hand out toward the sky. And because of his action and his obedience and his faithfulness, the sky was darkened for 3 days. Adonai could have done that all on his own. He doesn't really need to have someone do it for him, but he partners with his people. And through our obedience to him, miracles happen. He carries out his will through people. So, instead of saying, Father, that's kind of really silly that you're asking me to do something. I don't get it. Why would you ask me to reach up my hand toward the sky? Why do I have to do that? Do we ever do anything like that when he tells us to do something? So he asks us to do something. Do we need to completely understand the whole reason behind it? Should we make him tell us before we do it why and all the details? Okay, we as parents or grandparents, we give out direction to our children and we say, go clean your room. Why? Now, they know why. But many times they want a reason. If you need to explain to your child why they need to clean their room, well, maybe it's not going to be such a pleasant experience. Now, in telling my child to clean her room or telling her to wash the dishes or whatever, the dishes get done. There's not a, let's see, it's 3:15 right now. If I wait 15 minutes so that I can do this, then maybe I'll wash the dishes in time so that, we don't need to understand every little reason why the Father gives us an order. When we get a direction, when we get an order from the Father, let's do it. Let's make it happen. But all the people of Israel had light in their homes. How could there be complete darkness over here in the same city as Goshen, where they were? Goshen had light in their homes. But in Egypt, which is right there, they were in complete darkness that they couldn't see their hand in front of their face. They couldn't even go anywhere. And have you ever been in a room or in a situation where you close your eyes and it's dark? It's not really dark, it's just that you can't see anything. You can kind of see light through your eyelids, right? But when the lights go down and you're unsure of your environment and your circumstances, can you feel the darkness? Have you ever felt like, I don't like this right now. Somebody turn a light on because I can't see. Well, they couldn't just turn the light on. For 3 entire days, they couldn't see anything at all. But it didn't affect Israel. Now, how many times are we presented with, this is what God has asked you to do, but the enemy, being Pharaoh here, wants to make a deal with you. I'm not going to allow you to do what God has asked you to do. God has asked you to get all of these Hebrew people and take all of their livestock with them and go out 3 days' travel into the desert to sacrifice and to worship him. But I'm not going to let you do that. What I'm going to allow you to do is you can go, but you can't take any of your animals with you. Are we tempted to say at this point, okay, I guess it's not really the Father's will. Can't really do it. I can't really do what He's told me to do. And then there's a compromise. We face that in our lives all the time. So there's an immense lesson here for us to learn. You tell it like it is. You tell it like it is. When God tells you to do something and we need to be obedient, where it says, Moshe said, our livestock will also go with us. He wasn't saying, well, I'll make you a trade. I have a deal for you. He was telling Pharaoh what was. This is what it is. We're taking our livestock with us. So he didn't compromise. And then he says, after Pharaoh again comes at him with intimidation and with fear, and he's like, the next time I see you, I'm going to kill you. You're going to die. I'm going to have you killed if I ever see you again. That's a pretty bad threat, right? But Moshe did not agree with that statement. He changed it up a bit. He said, well spoken, I will see your face no more. So, was Moses at this point cowering behind a shadow of Aaron or being intimidated, allowing himself to be intimidated? He was told in advance of the need. The Father met with him and told him, this is what I want you to do. He didn't tell him a couple of months earlier from when he wanted him to do it. He was telling him as he went. As he was going through these plagues, he was giving him further instruction, more information as he went in obedience. He didn't lay out the entire blueprint. Okay, this is the blueprint here I have for the 10 plagues. Read the whole thing so you feel comfortable with my plan. He gave him a piece at a time, just like he gives us a piece at a time. And we just need to flow with his command. We need to flow with his direction and be obedient to that. Bring up the next slide. Okay, so the 9th plague was targeted against Ra, the sun god. Okay, and this is evidence that stands today that what you see in the picture on the left is in Egypt. It's carved in stone, and on the figure on the left is Pharaoh giving an offering to Ra, the sun god. He looked like he was a man, the false deity, with a falcon head. That's what Ra was depicted as. And so the picture on the right is another picture of Ra. And I don't know if you can see it very well, but he has a falcon head. And so he was considered the national god of Egypt, the divine father of Pharaoh. And he was a sun god. Okay, so being a god of the sun, he always brought light. So this is why the 9th plague was a plague of darkness for 3 days, because there was nothing Ra could do to break forth his own light in the situation. Nothing at all. Okay, the next slide. In Exodus chapter 11, verse 1 through 10, it says, Adonai said to Moshe, I'm going to bring still one more plague on Pharaoh in Egypt, and after that, he will let you leave here. Adonai's telling him one more piece of the puzzle. Okay, this is after plague 9. He's telling him about the 10th plague. Remember, he didn't lay out the whole plan of plague to Moses from the beginning. He gave him what he needed to know along the way. When he does let you go, he will throw you out completely. Now tell the people that every man is to ask his neighbor and every woman, her neighbor, for gold and silver jewelry. Adonai made the Egyptians favorably disposed toward the people. Moreover, Moshe was regarded by Pharaoh's servants and the people as a very great man in the land of Egypt. Moshe said, "Here is what Adonai says, about midnight I will go out into Egypt, and all the firstborn in the land of Egypt will die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh sitting on his throne to the firstborn of the slave girl at the handmill, and all of the firstborn of the livestock. There will be a horrendous wailing throughout all the land of Egypt. There has never been another like it, and there will never be again. But not even a dog's growl will be heard against any of the people of Israel, neither against people nor against animals. In this way you will realize that Adonai distinguishes between Egyptians and Israel. All of your servants will come down to me, prostrate themselves before me, and say, 'Get out, you and all the people who follow you.' And after that, I will go out." And he went out from Pharaoh in the heat of anger. Adonai said to Moshe, "Pharaoh will not listen to you, so that still more of my wonders will be shown in the land of Egypt." Moshe and Aaron did all these wonders before Pharaoh, but Adonai had made Pharaoh hard-hearted, and he didn't let the people of Israel leave his land. Moshe was regarded by Pharaoh's servants and the people as a very great man in the land of Egypt. Why? Remember, he was raised with Pharaoh as his own son, right under his nose. He grew up being educated. He grew up being in the presence of all of Pharaoh's servants. They knew him. Many of these people still knew Moses. You know, as I was studying for the portion and reading all kinds of commentaries and things, you know what a handmill is? Where the slave girl was at a handmill. I was thinking, oh, is that like a spinning wheel or something where you go like this and you make the yarn? No, that's not what it is. A handmill is like a big bowl, and there's a stone that's in there that like is comfortable and about the size where the palm of your hand would fit. And you get the grain and you go like this to grind the grain, to mill it into flour so that you can make bread. So I just found that very interesting, how the tool that makes the bread is mentioned here. And also, I underlined, not even a dog's growl will be heard against the people of Israel. So in my mind, this is what I'm thinking. I'm thinking, oh, so when they leave Egypt, after, they do the Passover sacrifice, they leave Egypt and it's going to be quiet. Not even the dogs are going to bark. Dogs in Egypt were not kept as pets. They were a nuisance. The Egyptians didn't like dogs. They were just to work with. Dogs were not kept as domesticated animals in Egypt at this time. So dogs were actually feral dogs. They were wild. Nobody set some food out and water for them every night. They were out on their own. So it's interesting here that not even a dog's growl will be heard against any of the people of Israel. So that brings on another dimension of thought, what that really means. That means that as the people leave Israel, they have a divine protection. that not even a distraction of a growling dog will be there. Next slide. Okay, death of the firstborn, the 10th plague. The false deity here is Pharaoh himself. You know, Pharaoh, he believed that he was the bright and morning star. He believed this in reading some of the writings of Josephus. He actually believed he was responsible to make the sun come up every day and to make it set. He was the morning. He was a god that Ra, the sun god, was his spiritual father, and that he was in partnership with Ra to lead the people as a king, as Pharaoh. Well, every year in Egypt at this time, it was a practice for the people of Egypt to practice and observe a Sed festival, S-E-D. Okay, so what happened during this Sed festival is Pharaoh would go with this procession of people, and he would parade around Egypt and go wherever he wanted to go amongst all the city of Egypt and do what he wanted to do. And what that was proclaiming to the people was that I am supreme leader here. And it was like a party. It was a parade, a display that he asserted his kingship, his supremeness on the people, and the people saying, yeah, we submit to this supremeness. So as this false deity, Pharaoh, Adonai, Yahweh, went through Egypt, and he asserted his kingship. And he showed the people everywhere his kingship. You know, backing up just a little bit, you know, it was a common practice during this time for the Egyptians to paint their doorposts red because it was to ward off demons. Now, during this time, it was the instruction given to us in the Passover instruction here in this portion to put the blood of the lamb on the doorposts, which made it red, but it didn't ward off demons. It was the Father himself, it was Yeshua, who passed over the door and protected it as the destroyer went by. Pharaoh couldn't do a thing about it. How could he assert his kingship when Yahweh went through Egypt and asserted his? It was a direct hit on Pharaoh. It was the biggest slap in the face that he could have ever gotten. You know, as studying this portion, I'm sure you can agree with me as you studied it. Plagues happened back then, and plagues continue to this day. But reading about them and studying about them in the scriptures, it's really exciting, okay? It's like, whoa, you know, that matches this God, and this targets this one, and like we're reading it and we're into it and we're excited about learning this information. But what about when the plague hits? What about if a plague hits us today? Granted, we are protected, and we have a divine covering over us as Israel, as his people, as his set-apart ones. But what do you think the people of Israel were feeling at the time when plagues 4 through 10 were happening, and it wasn't happening to them? What do you think? How would you feel if plagues were happening today, but not to any of Israel, any of us? It's like, whoa, that's exciting. That's amazing. That's major, okay? Well, we need to know who we are so that when these plagues come, we don't compromise. We are not living in fear. Go to the next slide. We need to know how to hear our commander's voice. We need to know what his instructions are and how to differentiate between voices in our own head, our own voice, or the voice of the enemy. The way that we're going to be able to tell is if it's in alignment with what the Torah already says. You need to know who you are. This portion shows us that Moses took his place. In the beginning, he was intimidated, he was afraid, he was thinking like, yeah, I'm really not worthy, I'm not up for this, pick somebody else. But now, as he went through the plagues, and he's been going on, has now seen the blueprint of the plagues. He knows who he is. He tells Pharaoh what for. And he leads the people out of Egypt. They are redeemed. So, several years ago, I always read Exodus as a really amazing story, a miracle that God did. This is a really, a lot to learn here. That we continue to learn things that are very, very important for us to apply to our lives today, especially as the people are out in the wilderness. But why is the Exodus story there? The Exodus story is there because it's going to be an example for us. Exodus is just as prophetic as Revelation. Is this whole story, is this a prophetic event? Are we going to need to contend with this type of thing again? We are. Next slide. In Jeremiah chapter 3, verses 1 through 8, I want to read this for you, and I want you all to pay attention. Because as we know, Jeremiah is a prophetic book. It's a picture of today, this year, 5776, 2016. Okay, Jeremiah is speaking to us who are alive in 2016. It says, "Oh no, the shepherds are destroying and scattering the sheep in my pasture, says Adonai. Therefore, this is what Adonai, the God of Israel, says against the shepherds who shepherd my people. You have scattered my flock, driven them away, and not taken care of them. So I will take care of you because of your evil deeds, says Adonai. I myself will gather what remains of my flock from all of the countries where I have driven them, and bring them back to their homes, and they will be fruitful and increase their numbers. I will appoint shepherds over them who will shepherd them. Then they will no longer be afraid or disgraced, and none will be missing, says Adonai. The days are coming, says Adonai, when I will raise a righteous branch for David. He will reign as king and succeed. He will do what is just and right in the land. In his days, Yehudah will be saved. Israel will live in safety, and the name given to him will be Adonai Zidkenu, Adonai our righteousness. Therefore, says Adonai, the day will come when people no longer swear, as Adonai lives, who brought the people out of Israel, out of the land of Egypt, but as Adonai lives, who brought the descendants of the house of Israel up from the land to the north and from all the countries where I drove them, then they will live in their own land. Do you hear what's happening there? We should be so excited about this scripture. This scripture says that we're no longer going to wonder and be in amazement about the great things that Yahweh did during the Exodus. We're now going to be talking about how Israel, the 12 tribes, were reunited and became one stick in his hand, and that we now are taken and live in the land of our inheritance. What's the big deal about Israel? Do you know you're landowners in Israel? You have an inheritance in Israel. It's awesome. Do we have anything to be kind of excited about, to know what the future is? Because here we have our future coming to light. We have our future being presented to us. We have an event that's coming. Next slide. Now, it may not look like this. It may look much different. It may look like this. But we have a great event to look forward to. For our live streaming audience, I don't know if you can see the picture. The picture is Yeshua riding in on a white horse when he comes again for his bride. And he's got an army behind him. Does this make you excited? Does it make you feel like, oh, this could happen like soon and in our lifetime? You know, we don't have a thing to worry about. No matter what happens with the world's economy, no matter what happens with the stock market, no matter who becomes the next president, we don't have a thing to worry about, because we can take all of our faith and put it in the one true King, the one God there is. Only him do we worship. Only him do we obey. We need the scriptures to encourage us, to encourage our hearts. We need to have the assurance in our hearts, because we may not always be able to walk around like this. We may not be able to demonstrate that we are studying this book. This is a luxury we have in this country right now. Not in all countries can you do this. You need to have this in here. Now, in the day where those in other countries don't have the luxury of reading the scriptures from a book, they need to be here. Now, I wanted to ask the Ackerman family if they would come. I've asked them to recite a very important psalm that I would recommend that everyone take to heart. The book of Daniel, chapter 12, talks about those who will be blessed are those who endure to the 1335th day. We need to endure some stuff. There's going to be some stuff that we need to endure. We need to hang in there. And we need to be encouraged. And what's going to encourage us is the scriptures and hearing the voice of the commander. So, there was a red mic up here. Do you have a mic? There's a mic right here. I want to have the kids hold the mic and And Tom also, where's Dawn? She's probably with the kids. Okay. All right. Psalm 91 is a psalm that talks about divine protection for us. I want to have these kids come over here. I want to have these kids. This is Bethia, and this is Lucas, and this is Tom, as you know. I want them to read, and this is Joshua, the Ackerman kids. I want them to read to you Psalm 91 and watch how they do it. Go ahead.
Whoever sits in the refuge of the Most High, he shall dwell in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of Hashem, He is my refuge and my fortress. My God, I will trust in Him. That He will deliver you from the ensnaring trap and from devastating pestilence. With His pinion He will cover you, and beneath His wings you will be protected. Shield and armor is His truth. You shall not be afraid of the terror of night, nor of the arrow that flies by day, nor the pestilence that walks in gloom, nor the destroyer who lays waste at noon. Let 1,000 encamp at your side, and a myriad at your right hand, but to you they shall not approach. You will merely peer with your eyes, and you will see the retribution of the wicked. Because He said, You, Hashem, are my refuge. You have made the Most High your dwelling place. No evil will befall you, nor any plague come near your tent.
You testing them?
Yeah, I'm testing.
He commands His angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways.
On your palms they will carry you, lest you strike your foot against a stone. Upon the lion and the viper you will tread. You will trample the young lion and the serpent. For He has yearned for me, and I will deliver him. I will elevate him because he knows my name. I will call upon him, and he will answer me. I am with him in distress. I will release him, and I will honor him. With long life will I satisfy him, and I will show him my salvation. With long life will I satisfy him, and I will show him my salvation.
Amen. Great job. Thank you for doing that. Now, they didn't read that. They know that. When are they going to need it? Don't know. But they've got it. We need to have it just as much. Whether it's memorized, whether it's just in us, we need to have the scriptures in this day for what's ahead, because we need to endure to the 1335th day. We don't want to give up on the 1334th day. We need to hang in there. Now, it may not be pleasant, but it's going to be amazing. And we are going to be protected. We can take these scriptures for face value. We can take them and believe them and trust them. We are Israel. We are protected. So we have a great future. I hope this portion has encouraged you. I hope that you have found that God is specific in what He's doing today, and that we have a distinct honor in knowing that we are specifically selected to be alive in this day for what's at hand. And we each have an assignment and a job to do. And it's going to be super cool and super awesome.